Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro, and welcome to Grandma Has ADHD. I'm a certified senior move manager and owner of Silver Linings Transitions, where I help people navigate life's big transitions. But here's the thing: I spent years helping families move through change while completely missing the pattern that was running through my own life. I'm the daughter of two ADHD parents, the mother of three ADHD children, and yep, I have ADHD too. For years, I didn't have the language or understanding for what that meant. But becoming an ADHD coach and specialist, that's been absolutely game changing. Not just for how I work with my clients, but for how I relate to my family and honestly, for how I understand myself. I even wrote a book about it called This Explains So Much. This podcast is for all of us who are discovering ADHD later in life. Each week, I bring you conversations with industry experts and people sharing their own ADHD journeys, real stories, real strategies, and often a little too much information. If you're loving what you're hearing, please share this podcast, leave us a review, and find me at jamishapiro.me. That's JamiShapiro.me. Whether you're over 50 and just getting diagnosed, or you're recognizing patterns you've lived with your whole life, this is your space to navigate ADHD with others who get it. So grab your coffee and get comfortable, and let's dive in. So if you've been listening to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast for any length of time, you have heard me speak about the Sparkler Society and how it's coming in July. Well, I am really excited because waiting is horrible, even for me. And in June, we are opening our doors for a trial run. This is going to be absolutely free. It's an opportunity for you to join the community, find out what it's about, and help us kind of work out the kinks. So if you like what you hear, if you're looking for authenticity, you want to come as you are, you want to get your shit together with other people who want to get their shit together, then I would love for you to find me at jamishapiro.me. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me, and find the Sparkler Society where you can join the waitlist. And in June, we're going to kick it off with our first 14-day challenge. We are going to tackle the bathroom. And if you join us, you're going to know why we picked the bathroom. So I cannot wait to get started. This community is going to change your life. So hope you enjoy the podcast. Can't wait to meet you in person. Today, I am talking to someone who didn't just study ADHD from a textbook. She's lived it, breathed it, and turned it into her superpower. Brooke got diagnosed with ADHD later in life, married into a whole family of ADHDers, and said, you know what? I'm going to help thousands of people navigate this journey. She is the founder of Coaching with Brooke, a 4-time Best Life Coach of Boca Raton winner, a best-selling author, and the brilliant mind behind the #1 Listener's Choice mental health podcast, Successful with ADHD. She's been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, and on stages alongside legends like Mel Robbins and Gary Vee. Brooke is a powerhouse coach who has transformed countless lives with her revolutionary 3C activation program, and also looks like Brooke Shields. And I don't know if I added that part or not, but we met at a conference and I'm like, you look just like Brooke Shields. So welcome, Brooke Schnittman, to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous because you've done some good work.
Thank you. It's always, I feel major imposter syndrome every time someone reads my bio, and I appreciate it. And funny, I was obsessed with Brooke Shields growing up, and I happened to meet her 8 years ago at a horse show when I was promoting a school, and she was the nicest person. She brought me into pictures. I happen to have a picture with her on Instagram. And yeah, she's a sweetheart. So thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. Well, you know what? We sat next to each other at a session at the International ADHD
Yep.
conference. You and I did. And I'm like, has
Yep.
anybody ever told you look like Brooke Shields, who, by the way, I used to idolize her as well. I'm a little older than you are. She was a couple of years older than I am. And so, you know, the little girl that looks up to the teenagers and just like has the starry looks in her eyes. And, you know, so that was Brooke
Yep.
Shields for me, by the way. And you do look like her. And you
thank
showed me.
you.
I don't remember if I said it, but you showed me the picture. So I did not ask you, and I cannot tell from your bio, and I hope that it is okay if I ask you if you also have ADHD or if you just married into it.
No, I do have ADHD, but the funny thing is my whole life have tracked for doing things to help people with ADHD. But growing up, I was diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder, so I received speech for it. And then I also was in and out of therapy my whole life for anxiety and low-grade depression.
Oh,
And
there you
then
go.
I also, in high school, my mom was a math teacher, so she pushed accommodations on me. So my reading level was a little bit slower, timed compared to untimed. So all these things were happening. And I came from a family of educators. I naturally either wanted to be a fashion designer or an educator. And my mom was like, no, don't be a fashion designer. You're going to make no money off of that. Become an educator. And so I went into elementary education. There was one class on special education in it. And then I went and got my master's in students with disabilities because I wanted to know more about it. I was a special education teacher working with ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism. I became an administrator as assistant director of special education. Still did not know I had ADHD. This is the whole point of this story. And then I moved to Florida because I was feeling in administration that it definitely was not leaning to my strengths, but also I felt very removed from working with children. So I moved to Florida. My family was here. I got life coached. I was recommended by a friend to become an ADHD coach. I didn't know what that was. I knew what ADHD was, but I didn't know about what ADHD coaching was. And she had a similar background to me. I said, yeah, whatever it is, just sign me up. So I signed up. I became an ADHD coach. And 6 months into it, I realized, oh, wait a second. This is tracking for me. I see myself in the adults that I'm coaching online because I'm having a hard time task switching from working with them and coaching them, which I love, but then doing my notes and then coming back and going back and forth. So that was just the first piece of the puzzle. I learned I had ADHD. And then 6 months after that, I met my non-diagnosed ADHD husband and his two non-diagnosed ADHD sons. And my husband was like, I really think that one of my sons has ADHD. I'm like, well, he has ADHD, you have ADHD, and so does the other one. He's like, no. And I'm like, yes, like I can't diagnose you, but I'm almost positive all three of you have it. One is inattentive, one's hyperactive, you know, you're a little bit of both. And they all got diagnosed. And so we were a family of four. Then we had a girl who's a 4-year-old and is displaying a lot of hyperactive ADHD symptoms, but the doctor won't diagnose her yet. So she's suspected to have ADHD. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so here's, first of all, two things. So when we were at the ADHD conference, I was collecting stickers for my water bottle, but one of my favorite ones is, it says, keep talking, I'm diagnosing you. And I think when you have ADHD, and especially when you understand ADHD as an ADHD coach, it's very hard to not diagnose other people. I mean, we can't, by the way, I like to say I'm not a doctor. I can't formally diagnose anybody, but I say if it quacks like a duck and it waddles like a duck and it looks like a duck, you might be able to identify that it's a duck. And then the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that I was diagnosed when my oldest child was diagnosed. And I remember so my child's non-binary and about to turn 25, and they were a teenager, and they came to me and they said they wanted to be evaluated for ADHD. And I said, you don't have ADHD. You've been reading since you were 3 years old, because I could not sit still to learn to read. And I didn't think I had ADHD. And I had a hyperactive little brother who was put on Ritalin and was a classic 1980s little boy on, with ADHD. And so sure enough, as happens when they evaluate you, they bring in a parent or another person. And I looked at the psychiatrist and legitimately answered more questions that were yes for me, because I am hyperactive and inattentive, where my child is just inattentive. So ding, 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 I actually, had more signs of ADHD than my
Sure.
child. So, but all this to say that then I discovered that my mom had it, which was how this whole podcast happened, because I was, 45 at the time. At that point, I had graduated college with high honors. I had started a business, but then I was raising 3 children and going through a divorce. And I'm like, okay, I have ADHD. And I put it aside, didn't think anything of it. But when I realized that my mom and all of these generations of women that never got diagnosed and didn't have children that got diagnosed were like missing out of the conversation, I started the podcast. And then I started ADHD coach training. But I was almost through with the curriculum, and my youngest child got diagnosed with ADHD, and I didn't even see it because
Wow.
it looks so different than, it can look. Actually, there was one podcast, I don't remember who the person was, but she did a podcast. It was like the 8 girls with ADHD and like how they all presented so differently.
I love that. I've heard that there are 6,000 different ways ADHD can present. And I'm sure you've heard you meet one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. So I'm sure, since not only that we can't technically diagnose someone, but we're working with the symptoms anyway, right? That's how you help people with ADHD take a look at how it's showing up in their day-to-day life. It's not typically just ADHD. 80% of the time, it's another diagnosis as well. So
Mhm.
how is the dyslexia overriding some of the ADHD symptoms or coexisting with ADHD symptoms? How is the anxiety and depression? Like, is that masking and overshadowing some of the ADHD symptoms because you're compensating, or
Mhm.
OCD? So yeah, there's so many different presentations.
Yeah. So my middle child has been diagnosed with OCD. She just graduated from college, and now we're starting to put the pieces together that she likely has ADHD as well. So speaking of the OCD, because she was such an overcompensator,
Correct.
that her siblings had rooms that looked like bombs went off. Everything had to be in its place. She needed schedule and structure, and yeah. So it's fascinating, isn't it?
Not from a psychological point, but I think from a success point, a lot of people who have OCD or anxiety, high levels of anxiety, often compensate way more and do better without people knowing,
Right.
until they understand and become more aware, and then of course work through those symptoms.
Right. And that actually was one of the questions that, I always ask my guests, what can I ask you? Because it helps me to sort of funnel the conversation. And you said, ask me about my day to day life with my hormones and how, that is coming into the ADHD conversation for me.
I didn't realize I said that, but I am happy to talk about it. So so for me, I have not been told that I'm in perimenopause, but I do know that my testosterone levels are lower. So there's a lot more fatigue, a lot more brain fog. I also have a 4-year-old who wakes up in the middle of the night,
Oh.
and that does not help my ADHD symptoms. And I even got an Aura ring to track how well my sleep is. And then, of course, when you're in luteal phase with your period, that messes up your chaos of ADHD. So I'm not, like I said, in perimenopause or menopause to my knowledge yet, but that definitely causes major chaos in your ADHD. When you think you've had it all figured out and you have all the structure figured out, then boom, hormones are coming. And now
Yes.
you have to play a role into that.
Right. Well, I'm older than you by 15 years.
Mhm.
And just went through menopause this just January, and I'm afraid if I should tell you the answers to the test, or if you just want to be surprised when you get there. it's
I want to
it's
be surprised when I get there. I do not want to have the anticipatory anxiety going into it, but yeah.
sure, yeah. That's exactly what somebody with ADHD needs, is a little fuel for the anxiety fire, right?
No, but so many people figure out that they have ADHD when they do go into menopause or perimenopause, because they now can no longer use the systems and the structures that they had, because this is wreaking havoc on their daily lives. So not that they just all of a sudden got ADHD, but their management system is failing.
Right. And I will say for me, I don't think I ever would have realized that I had ADHD until I had to juggle a household, right? And I had
And
all
also
of
your
this.
child got diagnosed too.
Well, that of course, that too. It's so funny, Brooke, and I'm not making this up. Literally today, I got a text message from an old friend whose parents are aging, and she needed. So my business before getting into this was as a senior move manager. So when a senior has been in their home for many years and it's time for them to right size or downsize or move to a community or move to be near children, that's an overwhelming project. And so I am actually part of a national industry called the National Association of Senior Move Managers. So she reached out to me to say, hey, it's about time we move my mother-in-law. Do you have some suggestions? I said to my friend, I'm like, so she was my very first friend who was diagnosed with ADHD. And she had a son that we were in a play group together. And every time they came over, we locked up our closets because her son would literally come into your house, take everything off the shelf, throw it around. And it was so like we either didn't host her or we literally locked it up. And I remember, and I even remember where we were standing when she said that she had just been diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, oh, what does that look like? And she starts to describe it. And I looked at her, I'm like, that's not me. And I said, do you
Until it
know?
is.
It was me. I said, I would have had 20 years of understanding if I had just, but it does ebb and flow through our own lives. And I actually remember taking a test and screenshotted it because my ex-husband used to accuse me of having it. And the test said I didn't have it. And I'm like, see, I don't have it, but we do. It's
Well, that happens so many times with women. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's also a therapist and works with people with ADHD. And she was saying, like, a lot of these questions, of course, are geared towards children, but also when we cope and manage because we're overperforming, we're masking. When someone says, are you organized? Like, you're going to say yes, right? Are you keeping it together yourself? Yes, right? So there's all these questions on the assessment that doesn't look at if you have compensated for so long.
Do you know, it's so interesting. I noticed me doing this today because I'm leading a board meeting for my organization. And I didn't sleep well last night because I felt the pressure of making sure that the agenda was what it needed to be.
Oh, yeah.
And
Right.
going
Perfectionist.
over it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And so, yeah. So to everybody else, it looks like I have it together, but the amount of effort that I had to put out, and because I do, back to your imposter syndrome, you mentioned it at the beginning of my introduction to you, which I totally understand. And it's so common for people with ADHD to have that imposter syndrome. And that was how I was feeling as I go into this board meeting of, I'm an officer of this board and I'm running this meeting and I'm feeling like, what if they figure it out that I don't have it all together? And so,
Yeah. Right. I also heard that 70% of women have imposter syndrome, and then you add ADHD to it and entrepreneurship, and that's a whole new level. So
yeah.
also when you experience trauma, that also, changes your nervous system, which then also can lead to you feeling like an imposter anytime there's success, because all we think about are the negative thoughts, right?
Sure. So, can you take me back to little Brooke? Because one of the things that
Ah,
because when people hear, because, sometimes, and by the way, welcome if this is your first time listening to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. Sometimes this, the latest episode is the first one that people will hear. And, maybe the people that listen to you will follow. But I always like to take it back to childhood because then people are like, oh, I did that.
yeah. Oh, okay. There's always a sensation in my body that comes through when I am about to talk about this because it's still pretty raw. My
Mhm.
experience wasn't everyone's experience. So, on the outside, to your point, it seemed like I had it all together. But much of my story in childhood was getting bullied and
I
severe bullying pretty
mm,
much my whole life through adulthood. So, Some of that was because of my ADHD symptoms that I did not know about, which other people also didn't know about because I didn't know about it and they weren't educated about it, right? So I was impulsive. I called out in class. I would walk up to the teacher's desk. Also, because I came from a private school to a public school, so I didn't know those
Mhm.
standards and rules that we needed to follow in a public school system. I had rejection sensitivity after, perceived thoughts of someone talking about me or, ruminating on, oh, I did that wrong. I need to talk again about it. And then what ended up happening was that I socially isolated myself from everyone because I shrank. The
Mhm.
people who wanted to be friends with me, I didn't think like, oh, those would be good friends, right? I didn't know myself. I didn't know who to look for. So I was gravitating towards the dopamine of the popular kids of, oh, the high of like, I need to be friends with those people. So because I was actually rejected from this group, I had that all or nothing mentality of like, nope, this is it. Like, I don't have any friends. So I shrank.
Mhm.
And I think I socially didn't progress the way that I should. And
Mhm.
then, of course, there's ADHD. And then, as far as academics, if you don't feel safe in a classroom, you don't learn. So it would take me
Mhm.
10 times more time at home to learn the material, to feel like I can master it. My parents pushed me into accelerated classes that I
Mhm.
probably did not belong in.
Mhm.
So on the outside, most people just saw this like tall girl
Well,
who,
you're very
you know,
pretty. I would imagine that you were, and I hate to say that, but there is also that obsession with how we look, because if we look good, then maybe we won't get bullied or people will think
yes.
that,
Yes,
yeah.
I became hyper aware of how I looked. In fact, when I went to college, I gained a lot of weight, freshman 25.
Mhm.
And then I also had a mom who was probably also has ADHD, but was very big on appearances also. So, yes, I had to keep that. Like, that was the one thing I felt like I had going for me. Like, I had to look good on the outside because I didn't have it all together on the inside. And that
Well,
was not only weight, it was controlling how my clothes were, what I would buy, what I put out on social media. So, yeah.
I want to first of all acknowledge your vulnerability, and I'm just tell you that I have tears behind my eyes right now, because my oldest child, you almost described, Will, now, was a girl until college and is now non-binary. And yeah, there was so much, like, we kept pulling, and Will was beautiful, and we kept pulling Will out of schools because, and I remember actually at one point when we had a teacher conference and the teacher saying, Will's so focused on the kids that don't want to be friends with her, but here there are these other kids that do, and she doesn't want anything to do with that. And then I learned, one of the best things about hosting a podcast is everybody that I get to talk to. And I don't know if it was a podcast that I hosted or I heard, but it was that sometimes we're so caught up with ADHD, with that dopamine, with the chase and the romantic, like, and then when it's there for us, we don't know what to do with it because we're so caught up
Exactly.
in the thrill of the chase. But I also want to acknowledge something that you said that I haven't heard before. And that was, even though I might have been very smart, you were in trauma response. So of course your brain wasn't going to take in. I just
Anything.
Yeah, I got flooded today by something. And I work with an assistant, and she could see what went through my body, and when my brain just shut down, And so that's where when people say to me, in fact, I had a woman reach out about speaking, and of course, when someone gives me indications that they might have ADHD, then of course I'm like, well, have you considered that you might have ADHD? And then she says, well, why does it matter? I mean, she's like in her 70s, and she's like, I have a good life. Why does it matter? And I'm like, oh my, like, it just, I mean, what do you say to someone when they say, why does it matter?
Well, first of all, so I know that your audience is 50 plus, right?
Ish. I mean, like, we don't turn anybody away because they're they're underage. We're not like
Yeah.
the bouncer at the thing, but yeah,
Yeah. So growing up, my mom used to say, you can't go to therapy because it'll be on your permanent record. I know that for Gen X, older millennials, for boomers, it was seen down on to have a label. Why would you get labeled? Even when I realized I had ADHD, I said to my dad, I said, oh, look, I have ADHD. I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm just letting you know. And I think that generation is ingrained from when they grew up that why do you need a label?
Mm-hmm.
Where we now are understanding ourselves and becoming aware, which is always the first step to make changes in your life and change the way your neuroplasticity is. But you can't overcome something if you're not aware of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you define neuroplasticity for our audience? Because whenever there's a big word, I always, especially if it's one they might not have heard, I'd love to hear how you describe neuroplasticity.
Yeah. So we're born with like millions of neurons, billions of neurons, right? And they shape the way that we think, they shape the way that like what we do. And when someone says to you, and this has happened with a previous client that I worked with, you can't change the way you think, you can't change the way you act, you can't change the way that you behave, you can't change your emotions, that's completely wrong. And it doesn't matter how old you are. So we can create new neurons in our brain because our brain is like plastic and it's like a muscle and we can change it. Actually, I heard that there was a study out there that people who passed, they created new neurons even afterwards, which then shows that even in dementia patients, even in people with ADHD, even people with executive dysfunction, we can create these neural pathways that help us learn, grow, change the way we think, change the way we act, change the way we do. So there's constant growth that can take place.
So you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yes. It does take a lot of practice and accountability and work, right? Because our brain is wired to go back to how we've been our whole lives. And the older we get, the longer we have practice in behaving a certain way. So it's not easy.
No.
And like I said, our brain's like a muscle. If we don't use it and we don't practice it actively, then it's going to atrophy. But with the reticular activating system, we can change the way we think, change the way we see things, change an old brain's or old dog's way of thinking.
I love reticular activating system. Also, I'm into like self-help and all that stuff. And just for any of you who are listening who haven't heard that term before, it's basically like what you go looking for is what you see. So if you are, looking for a new car and you're shopping for, say a Prius, then you're going to start to be paying attention to every time.
Prius is everywhere.
Or for me, because I went through a lot of heartbreak. I also struggled with rejection sensitivity and feeling too much and all of that stuff. So my challenge was always relationships, romantic relationships. And so I felt like everybody else was in a relationship except for me. So I would look for see, they're in one and they're in one, but I'm not in one. So, but it, and it would just further reduce me down to, feeling sorry. And it was a struggle. I'm not going to take us down that rabbit hole. Okay.
But 80% of our thoughts are negative and 95% are repetitive. And that's just human nature in general. Then you add ADHD and the negative messages that we've received and the hypervigilant that we have acquired because of all the negative experiences. And now it's really a lot of work. A lot of work to rewire the thoughts.
It absolutely is. And you know what? That's a great example. So I have been using a MacBook Air for years with my finger as the mouse pad and the keyboard, right? And my fiance in my home office, because when I was writing my book, and I want to talk to you about writing a book, my back seized up because I was sitting so much. So he set me up for the walking desk and the double monitor and the mouse and the keyboard. And I have this beautiful desk. And do you know what a doom pile is?
Of course.
Okay. So for those of you who are listening, a doom pile is like all of this stuff on your desk that is doomful. And rather than organizing it, you just
add to it.
You stack it up and you move it. So that's basically didn't organize, only moved. So, but I wanted no excuse not to go back to my desk and try again. And just last night, I like hooked it up, and I was submitting to present at the International ADHD conference again. And I had all these screens open, and then I was getting super frustrated because I couldn't just, and now here I am back on my one little, keyboard laptop with the mouse at my finger versus this beautiful system, because it's so hard to learn something new. But the reality is that if I make up my mind to do it and I get over the discomfort, I would be able to do it.
So change does not come easily. It comes with discomfort. And I think if we know that ahead of time, then we could plan for those challenges while we're going through the discomfort. That's why so many of us just want to quit. It's like when we're building actual muscles, it is hard once you're tearing down your muscles to build new ones. Mm-hmm. Same thing with neuroplasticity and changing the way that we think. It is not easy. There will be peaks and valleys and times where it feels easy, but then you're going to have emotional dysregulation because you are activating pieces of you that was contained. Mm-hmm. So now we're activating those hard things, and it feels really uncomfortable. But that's why having someone, work alongside you or having that external accountability is really helpful.
Well, so we bring up activation, and I see that was in the title of your book and your program. So that is such a good segue. So we are going to pause and take a little break, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about that, but also the button question. I don't know if you've heard my podcast before, and it's okay if you haven't. I always ask my guests if they, from Penn Holderness's prompt at the international conference in 2024, he said, about the button, if he could not have ADHD, would he push the button and not have it? So I stole it from him, and I love that question. So we're going to pause, but I am going to just put in a little word for my sponsor, which is my real business, Silver Linings Transitions in San Diego. We, as I shared with you, we are a move management and home organizing company. And I do this podcast because I discovered ADHD after seeing it in so many of our homes that were battling clutter and were overwhelmed by how to move. Because talk about, a process that needs a lot of, not emotional regulation, executive functioning, is planning the task, doing it so when you say you're going to do it. So you're going to hear a word about that when we take a break. And you'll also hear more about my work as an ADHD coach. And then when we come back, Brooke is going to answer the button question. And we're going to talk about her activation center. But if you are enjoying this podcast, please like it and share it. To Brooke's point, we have generations of women and men, but my audience is mostly women, who were stigmatized by any sort of label or disorder or mental health problem. And so they're not allowing themselves to understand why it makes a difference because they're so afraid to avoid that label. And so one of my big passions is educating people and destigmatizing ADHD, especially for older adults, because thankfully younger generations are more willing to say, yep, I've got it. I'm going to put it all over TikTok, and I'm not going to hide it. And it's so freeing when you do really get to live authentically. So we're going to pause. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then Brooke's going to come back and join us. I used to dread visiting my mother. Because of the clutter, the piles, the chaos, we all experience clutter differently. For me, it was a source of anxiety and stress. I'd try to help, and she'd get defensive. We were both frustrated, and it was destroying our relationship. Then we discovered something that changed everything. My mother had ADHD, and she'd been living with it undiagnosed for over 76 years. Suddenly, it all made sense. The clutter wasn't laziness. The disorganization wasn't a choice. Her brain was wired differently, and no amount of willpower or traditional organizing advice was ever going to work. That discovery became my life's work. It's why I started the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. It's why I became an ADHD coach and specialist. And it's why I am so passionate about helping women like my mother and maybe like you. Because here's what I know: clutter affects us emotionally and physically. It damages relationships, it creates shame spirals, and the overwhelm of not knowing where to start keeps you frozen. But it's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's brave. If you're in the San Diego or Coachella Valley area, my team at Silver Linings Transitions can come to your home. We'll help you tackle the clutter with compassion, not judgment. I also work with women virtually through one-on-one ADHD coaching. And if you are overwhelmed with clutter, I can connect you with trusted resources in your area. Visit jamishapiro.me to get started, or grab my book, This Explains So Much, on Amazon. My mother and I got our relationship back. You can get your peace back too. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. Moving can feel overwhelming, whether you're downsizing, relocating, or helping a loved one transition. There are so many decisions to make, details to handle, and emotions to navigate. At Silver Linings Transitions, we believe every move should be magical, not stressful. We're more than movers. We expertly guide you through the entire process and do our best to alleviate your concerns. From the moment we meet, you'll feel comfortable because we will listen to your needs and wants and work together to create a personalized plan that honors your memories and your cherished belongings while helping you embrace your next chapter. We visit your new space and create a detailed floor plan, ensuring your furniture and treasured belongings will fit safely. We handle the logistics so you don't need to worry about anything, from sorting and packing to coordinating the sale and donation of unwanted items. Our professional team uses efficient, eco-friendly bins and handles every detail with care. We coordinate with our vetted moving partners, oversee the logistics, and ensure nothing is left behind, even packing your refrigerator items. Here's where the magic happens. We don't just unpack. We recreate the feeling of home. Using photos from your previous space, we thoughtfully arrange your furniture, hang your pictures, and set up your kitchen and bathroom so everything feels familiar from day one. When you walk into your new space, it's not just moved in, it's home. Your coffee pot is ready, your favorite photos are perfectly placed, your bed is made, and your new chapter begins with comfort and joy instead of chaos. This is how Silver Linings Transitions makes moves magical. We handle the emotional lifting and the logistics so you can focus on what matters most, settling into your new home. Because every move deserves a silver lining. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro. I am an ADHD coach and the founder of Silver Linings Transitions, where we do home organizing and move management. And, I did not know that I had ADHD for years. And I remember personally hiring an organizing company to come in and help me because I could just never get it together. And it really wasn't until I understood ADHD and its impact that I realized why. And so I wrote a book, This Explains So Much, Understanding Undiagnosed ADHD, because I just feel like there's so many answers that people don't even know that they're looking for, especially generations of women who grew up thinking that ADHD was just for the hyperactive little boy. It turns out it's not only a body that can be hyperactive, but it can be a mind that's hyperactive. So you can have a wonderful day and you can have something wonderful happen, and then that one negative thing that happens is going to be the thing that takes you into that spiral, and it's going to be keeping you up at night, and you're going to be ruminating on it. And I think that, we as women carry so much shame and so much how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to have it together. together. And I remember that was the case for me. I remember, how is it that all of these women have so much consistency and their kids get the sticker charts and everything seems to run well. And I'm the one that's missing parent teacher conferences and my house, is always in chaos. And then again, that negative self-talk. So my mission is really to educate people who have no idea that ADHD has the impact that it does. And it's to connect you to other people who get it and who will make you feel that you aren't alone, you're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not too much. You just have a brain that was wired differently. And I can't wait for you to join me in the community that I'm building, the workshops that I'm creating, the book club that I'm hosting, because I know that I am going to make a profound difference in your life. So we are back with Brooke Schnittman. And first, I want you to answer the button question. Would you be done with ADHD if you could be?
ADHD has become a part of my life. Not only is it who I am, I also work with people with ADHD, and I also am a mom of 2 stepsons with ADHD and a wife of someone with ADHD. So it's ingrained in my being. And because of that, I would say no, I would not remove ADHD. Even though it comes with lots of challenges, it also comes with a lot of strengths, and it also is a part of me. So I can't see my life without it.
Do you know that I have interviewed I've done more than 90 interviews, but I started asking the question probably 10 interviews in. I've only had one person say they would push the button. Isn't that amazing? And it does come with its challenges. It does. And I like to liken it to this. I had horrific acne in high school, like to the point where I was teased. And, back when I grew up, if you had acne, there weren't stickers that you could put on them, and so it was the first thing that people would see, like you couldn't hide it. And I got teased and called names, and I ended up on Accutane. And I'm not somebody that takes medication. I have a lot of anxiety. I don't want to put things into my body, but I could not, I was so miserable, but I have amazing skin now. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm 56. My fiance is 9 years younger than me and he has more wrinkles than I do. And so I'm like, you know what? I had to put up with that, but I'm, going into, the second half of my life with young looking skin that I didn't even have to pay for. So it's sort of like
amazing. I'm glad that it worked for you, because I know they came with a lot of side effects too.
It did.
Like anxiety and depression too for many people. So, but I'm glad that it worked for you.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you all of the negatives that came, but you know what? Ultimately, it did clear up my skin. And so, okay, there's an ADHD squirrel moment you just saw, as we totally had. That was not in any interview plan, nor have ever discussed it on one of my podcasts, but here we are. Okay. So you mentioned the word activation, and first of all, I just want to stop by and acknowledge the accomplishments that to write a book, is a big deal. And to be a guest among those powerhouses. And I'm sure you heard Mel Robbins recently was on, or maybe you didn't. She was on the Sunday morning, the CBS Sunday morning. I don't remember.
Oh, I didn't see.
Yeah. So anyway, this is really funny. So my former mother-in-law, is one of those people that's like, Jami, why does it matter? Why are you doing all this work with ADHD? And then she sees Mel Robbins on this episode where she says something about her undiagnosed ADHD and all of the anxiety that she had lived with, and how now that she knows she has ADHD, it's been transformational. And my mother-in-law is like, oh, this is the thing. I'm like, yeah. It's a
yeah.
But
anyway, that happens with my parents too. They'll send me articles in, Harvard Business Review, because everyone's talking about it now.
Right. I know. And this weekend, it was on Apple News, on like a New York magazine, or I don't know. I can't even keep track, but yeah, everybody, I think they think I'm a receptacle for everything ADHD. And so, but what's nice is every time they send me something, I'm like, yeah, I knew that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. It's just a review.
Yeah, but you are quite accomplished. So tell me about your book, and it is active or the Revolutionary Three. Okay, just you tell me because I'm trying to make notes. I'm it's, my
Sure.
short summary, not good.
Sure. So it's called Activate Your ADHD Potential, and it is based off of my signature process called 3C activation. So when I first started coaching in my company, Coaching with Brooke 8 years ago, I was working with an adult client and she loved the strategies, but she's like, you know what? I really want to learn from other people who have it and are going through it. I want to be in a group. Can you create one? So, of course, I was like, yeah, of course, I can create one. So, we did a beta group and I took all the themes of the one on one clients that I was working with that I saw in them and I made them into lessons, which tapped into my education background. I love teaching.
Uh-huh.
And so we created 6 lessons and they loved it so much. They were like, let's do another 6 lessons. So basically, that's where it evolved. And since then, it's been over 7 years since I started that. But since then, it has evolved. It has there's lots of worksheets and tools, and it takes the 3C stand for control, consistency, and confidence. So basically, in order to be more productive, whatever that looks like to you, in order to be more confident, you have to know yourself. I think we've been talking about that a lot in this podcast. So, in order to know yourself, truly, we have to understand our intrinsic motivations, our strengths, our values, our core values, and also evaluate all the areas of our life now and where we want to go. So in the first 4 lessons, that's what I coach through. I also coach through, dread loops, reframing your thoughts, and making, our negative thoughts into positive thoughts, reframing them. But anyway, so that's the first module. It's in the book too. And then after that, then we move into more time management strategies and scheduling and organization, productivity, prioritization. From there, then people start feeling more empowered and then go into places they didn't know they wouldn't know before, and now start to do things that they would have felt more uncomfortable with from when they were first starting, like asking for a challenge, so a bold request, or having an uncomfortable conversation that they've avoided for a really long time. So having the script for that, creating their ADHD toolbox so they can come back to a piece of object permanence. They can see the tools and their own roadmap that have worked for them on the hard days where they are struggling. So basically, the program was the thing that started. Then I created the book because I wanted to make it more accessible for people. And then from the book, then I had a lot of people go through the program who were like, I'm a coach. I really want to use this with my clients. How can I use it with my clients? I was like, when you hear something enough times, then you finally say, okay, there's something I need to do. So I started training ADHD coaches in the model as well and training them to become ADHD coaches. So yes, that is the whole 3C activation, Activate Your ADHD Potential program.
Okay, so that remind me of the 3 C's. So it's to understand
Control, consistency, and confidence.
and confidence.
So it's basically rewiring old patterns and beliefs and thoughts and learning more about yourself. So with ADHD, we often start in survival mode, right? We don't even have the opportunity to create goals and to follow them. So we're in chaos mode from the beginning. So we want to start chipping away slowly at that rock, but also creating self-awareness. So we don't really care why you're doing anything, what you're doing. We just want action. So in the first 4 weeks, we're creating awareness of the ADHD and also creating accountability towards small actions that have been holding people back. After there's some momentum, then we're building that momentum. Now we have more space to actually create goals, to actually create time management strategies, to actually use a schedule. Yes, I'm saying that. To actually be productive, to actually delegate, to understand what's stressing us, to understand what energizes us. And then once we build on actions week after week, we become more confident because we're building and maintaining momentum. So then when we become more confident, which is stage 3, then we're asking for more challenges. We're asking to have uncomfortable conversations that you've been avoiding, to ask for bold requests, to delegate, and ultimately build your ADHD toolbox that you can come back to for life.
I love that. I love that. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really great. And it really ties back to the whole reticular activating system, right? Because now you're kind of
Mhm.
creating that new groove for yourself. I used to tell my kids they were building their resiliency muscle. Like if they were getting hurt or something was happening, I'm like, you're going to face a lot of hard times in life. And, if you learn how to face a hard time now, I like yoga. So I was going through my divorce, going through a lot with yoga. And one of the things I loved about yoga was getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. So being in a pose that didn't feel good, but learning that, okay, I can breathe through this and be okay.
Yes. So you bring up the reticular activating system. I do also talk about that in lesson 5 out of 12 because that is when they're doing solid goal setting because at this point they know more about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But with ADHD, we have future myopia and it's also very hard sometimes to vision.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about reticular activating system, but also how you can vision even if you have a hard time seeing the future. So I have a prompt that people use and they put into some AI software, whether ChatGPT, Claude, whatever they use. And it's like, give me a day in the life of me doing this goal. So now they can print out the
Love
script, put it in front of them, object permanence, visualize what it actually looks like because we know that if we visualize every day, you are more successful than just going through the motions and the steps.
I mean, I know my kids hate when I say I use AI, but I see it as accommodations for us.
It is an accommodation.
And I love the idea of like, here's a future goal and show me what that would look like. That is such a great idea. I love that. You said something else and I was super excited. And of course, I dropped it. And that is like the most
Happens to
frustrating.
me all the time.
I know. And that's one of the things that I love about doing this podcast also is that I am me. I don't pretend to be anybody else. One of the things that I've learned is I make this as easy as possible. And my kids are like, Mom, the production quality isn't good. And I'm like, if I had to have the good production quality and all of this stuff, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing and getting the message out. And so
Mhm.
what I say to people is like, let's eliminate that word and that need for perfect. And when we recognize sometimes good enough is good enough.
Yep.
And
The B
the only
minus can be better than the A plus.
Absolutely. I wanted to share one other thing that I do remember, but it isn't the thing I was going to tell you. I heard a great quote, speaking of yoga this week, which was doubt your doubts.
Yes. Yes. Well, it could also go the other way too. So doubt your doubts is great because they're just thoughts, right? And so we need to challenge them to create different behaviors and different actions. But also, I think it's really important not only to be positive about your visions and your goals, to also think about the challenges. So doubt the things that you don't doubt, especially with ADHD, because then we can be more resilient when we face these challenges and not let that sidetrack us into steering our motivation elsewhere.
Yeah, that was one of the things I meant to bring up too, was that when you anticipate what could be a landmine for you, and okay, how am I going to address that when it comes up so that you do have that? Oh, now I remember what I was going to tell you. I remember my mom, before we knew that she had ADHD, so I actually, quote unquote, diagnosed my mother at 76, just before her 77th birthday. Like many women that age, misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression. My mom I was concerned because my mom wasn't saving properly for her retirement. I'm an only child. I would want to have conversations with my mom. And I remember saying, well, Mom, what do you see in the future? Like, and she said, I don't see the future. And I never understood, and by the way, you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person with ADHD, because I see my future. But apparently that's a really common thing. And I also think one of the reasons I'm trying to get this message out is that we're so busy living in our now, that not now isn't even a consideration for us. And we really need to make our futures, and things that are coming, something that we are addressing. So,
Yes. Well, when we're in this state of like survival all the time, all you can think about is now. So, some of the questions that I know you've asked previously is like, how do you plan for over 50? Or, what changes with ADHD over 50? Well, you have all these structures in place. Even if they're negative structures, you still have structures and habits, right? And then you have systems and you go to work and you have potentially a spouse and you have kids, right? Potentially. And then all of a sudden you retire, you're an empty nester, you don't have the same systems. And then you have all this time to think about what you didn't plan for. And that can become really depressing.
Right. So what is your advice to somebody who is discovering ADHD later in life? Like, what is the one takeaway you want them to take from this podcast?
So things change. I love how you say one. I say that too on my podcast, and then I get 10 answers.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you are later in life, there are going to be lots of changes, and you might have gotten by and built an entire life around coping strategies. But when you are retired, or you have an empty nest, or all the things that I had mentioned before, those strategies won't necessarily work or be sustainable forever. So later in life, our life structure shifts, our energy levels change, our hormonal changes affect the brain. We talked about that. Our stress tolerance decreases, our executive functions start breaking down. Sorry, I know this is a really negative message so far.
Yeah, pretty much.
But instead of relying on stress and pressure, which so many of us people with ADHD do, young or older, we can start building systems for the first time that actually work with our brains, right? We can externalize memory. We can simplify decision making. We can create visual cues. We can build consistency through structure rather than willpower. So there is hope, but we need to work with different systems because life is different.
Okay, so what's your number one system? What's the one thing that you put in place that has helped you manage your ADHD?
I think externalizing things. So getting things out of my head and onto something, whether it be paper or something in front of me. So instead of telling myself, like, I need to remember to call my doctor tomorrow, like I immediately, if I don't have my calendar in front of me, I will just audio message it to my phone. Remind me at 4 p.m. that I need to put this into my calendar. Because at 4 p.m., I know I'm done with work for the day, right? And then I will have the time to then put it into my calendar. So if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. And you're 40 to 70% more likely to do the thing if it's scheduled. So externalize everything.
I would say that's also my number one, is like finally understanding, even though I tell myself I'll remember. No, I finally accepted
it's the biggest lie we tell ourselves with ADHD.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's so funny because there's sometimes I'm like, I am sure, or even like I'm in the shower, right? And I'm like, and it's such a good, because I get my shower epiphanies. And I'm like, I'll remember this. And then by the time I get out of the shower, no, I lost it. So frustrating. Brooke, this has been I love this conversation. I'm so grateful for your time, especially you have a lot of opportunities, and I know that you've got a young family and you're spread thin. Anything, I don't know if you do this, I know I do that, if I've had a conversation with someone and it didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to, or I wish I had said something, I'm like, why didn't I say this? So I want to make sure that you feel whole and complete when we walk away from this conversation, and that there was nothing that I should have asked you, because that also helps me, because then I don't have to worry about, I should have asked her. I put the onus on you.
You're so sweet. So first of all, that's an amazing question. And second of all, I, in the moment, never know. So probably tomorrow I'll be like, Jami, you can think of this other thing that you can ask your future guest. But I really do think that our time together, you made me feel very comfortable. You gave me the space to open up. Our conversation was very natural. So there's nothing in my mind right now that I could think of. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And I did some internal family system work actually with Jamie Bloom, who was one of my ADHD coaches.
I love IFS.
Yeah. And really where you talk to the little girl who was so hurt. And I just want to say to little Brooke, and I do have tears behind my eyes because I feel it. I feel that pain. So thank you. Thank you. And what would you, what she said to me is, what would you say to that little Brooke now? Like, wow, she be so proud of you?
You are strong. You've accomplished wonderful things. You have a great family. You can make your own choices and you can make your own decisions. That's what I say to my little Brooke, because I'm actively in IFS and EMDR. And one thing, I guess, now that you asked that we didn't talk about too much is trauma work. And I do believe that people with ADHD don't need talk therapy. They need trauma work.
I agree with you.
So I probably would have, if I knew that back then, I would have attached onto that way sooner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we all had the trauma of being bullied, of feeling too much, of it's definitely a shared.
Yeah, Jami, I did a survey for the only survey out there to my knowledge. It's called the CWB Adult ADHD Bullying Survey. And I surveyed 165 people. Out of 162 people who were valid, 90% of them were bullied as children and 80% were bullied as adults and 70% were bullied both in children and adulthood. So it is very common with ADHD.
Yeah. I mean, and now I'm feeling all of the feelings in my body as I'm processing what you just said too. And now I've got more tears. And so this was an amazing, amazing interview. Again, thank you. Thank you. I hate to leave it on that note, but I think it was powerful. And so, yeah. So if you're listening, you are listening to this podcast and taking from that, recognizing that we did grow up with more trauma and more negative messaging. And I think one of the most important things that you can do for yourself of the grief, of the relief of understanding ADHD is saying to that little girl or boy who survived what you survived, like, you did it, you got through it, and there wasn't anything wrong with you. So anyway, I am committed to making anyone who's listening the rest of your life the best of your life. Thank you so much, Brooke. It was awesome.
Thank you, Jami.
The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.